Lamar Jackson has once again had enough of the hate. He claps back at his haters in a ferocious way. We talk about that, some big Ravens and Jaire Alexander updates, and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. A friend available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, as an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well wherever you get your podcasts for 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens. Plus, we do bonus episodes like today. We had one yesterday as well, which if you want to go check out, highly recommend it. We also go live after every Ravens game, after every single piece of Ravens big news, and we have a lot of exciting things we're adding on to the show this season. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And of course, thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. Man, a lot of Ravens headlines over the course of the last couple of days. If I tried to jam-pack all these into one episode, I'd probably have to do like 2 or 3 different episodes, and that's why we do the bonus episodes sometimes over the weekend. So yesterday, we talked a little bit about LeSean McCoy defending Lamar Jackson and other headlines in there as well. We talked Jaire Alexander, of course, which we'll get to a little bit more here today. But in the final part of the show, we'll talk about if the Ravens are done or not. We'll talk about Ravens minicamp a little bit as well. We'll talk about some big Jaire Alexander updates that Jeremy Fowler and ESPN Insider revealed about how that all went down in the second part of the show. But in the first part of the show, Lamar Jackson's done. He's fed up. He's once again tired of it. He's tired of people trying to clown on him and hate on him. And we know Lamar will pop on social media every month, every couple of months, and either he'll joke around or he will let people know how he feels. And that is what he has done over the last couple of days. Just no mercy. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about what he is defending himself against and some of these narratives. Because, look, I'm just going to tell you right now, before we even get into it, Lamar Jackson has not held back on any of these people. And I personally love it. So let's dive into it. So this all started, at least the first thing that I see here when it comes to Lamar clapping back at the haters, is there was a post from Lamar about the thing, oh, well, he doesn't like to be called skinny, this, that, and the other. The post ended up being deleted. But someone comments, and this is a family-friendly show, there were some expletives thrown around here, so we're not going to say all of them. But this guy, this person says, well, then put on some weight, dummy, is what I'll say here. But he said, actually, the actual quote he said is, well, then put in some weight, dummy. And Lamar Jackson responds with laughing, crying emojis, and then says, then for you to use the word dummy, really let me know how bright you are, smarty. Let me go put in some weight, just mocking him. And so he was like, all right, we're done with this. We're done with this. Lamar's answer, by the way, about the whole being skinny thing, it was like jokingly funny. Like, oh, I prefer this. Like he wasn't being like 100%, hey, don't call me that. That's not good. I don't want to hear that. Like he wasn't, if you haven't seen the video, he's being joking. He's playing around. Like it wasn't really all that serious. And again, Lamar, there's no shortage of trolls with him or, people trying to get a rise out of Lamar. And look, like I give Lamar a lot of credit for getting on there and defending himself. Athletes, professional athletes, people in the spotlight Lamar is in. They deal with that every single day. And a lot of the time, the best course of action, at least what I'm sure a lot of these guys are told is to just, hey, it's going to happen. You're going to get a lot of it. Just let it be. Well, hey, Lamar taking a stand for himself. I like when Lamar does that because it shows that, hey, you know what? Lamar cares. Lamar wants to put the narrative himself out there. He doesn't want to let the narrative be shaped. He wants to also say, hey, I see what you're saying, and you sound really dumb saying it too. So that essentially is what Lamar said in this first one here. But then there was this whole viral thing over, I think the clip went viral on Instagram. I think that it started there, and then it kind of moseyed on to the other social media platforms. As it does, it gets picked up like crazy on these other platforms, and it just kind of spreads like that. But there was a podcast, a guy on a podcast, and the guy has taken this and absolutely ran with it on the podcast. But essentially, it ended up being about Lamar and Jaire Alexander and the Ravens and all this. And essentially, it was all no excuses. Ravens have no excuses. Lamar this, Lamar that. And Lamar found this podcast, I guess. He found this clip, and Lamar responds, quote, "I love how y'all lame. Stay on me. No excuses. When have I ever complained? Just say we have a solid on-paper roster so far and all that other stuff not called for. You don't play for the Eagles, Lil Bro. I continue to be a fan of the game." This guy's an Eagles fan, so that's where that came from. Then he started to take it even further. He's been talking about Lamar and Jalen Hurts and just like, oh, Lamar, I'm not Lamar's biggest op. He is. And I don't think Lamar's responded to any of that. And I think the best thing for Lamar to do here is, not to respond and give this guy the publicity he's looking for, because that clearly is what he is doing. I mean, it's a smart marketing play for him, but it doesn't really work unless Lamar responds. At least it doesn't get the maximum value there. So, Lamar gave this guy, a little 5 minutes of fame, right? Lamar, he saw it and he wanted to respond. But his point here is not wrong, by the way. He's like, look, all the other stuff about this, that, and the other, it isn't called for right now, right? Where we are not even done with the offseason yet. We don't even know what the Ravens' final roster is going to look like. Yeah, the Ravens have a great roster on paper, and as Lamar says, hey, just say that. Like, we have a solid roster. But what's all this other stuff right now? Once you start getting into, like, okay, where are they in week 5? Where are they in week 10? Like, yes, on paper, you can call it something, and I've said that for the Ravens, they have to be in that Super Bowl contention category, but we don't know what stuff's going to pop up for them this season, right? Whether good or bad. It's on both sides of the story there. So Lamar was in on that. And then that whole thing went viral. Like, it's this whole thing now. And so Isaiah Likely popped on to social media. He was on Twitter, and Isaiah Likely said, "Be trying to tell folks, leave Lamar Jackson alone because he will answer back." And then Lamar responded to him. He says, "They think they slick, making fake pages to try and look cool in the comments. These low people weird." And it's, a lot of these people don't have their, faces on when they try to make these comments on their profile pictures and stuff, or, they do make accounts just to do it, and it's not linked to their main account. And, Lamar's dealt with that for his entire career, not just professionally, but I mean, he was getting it in college at Louisville as well, and the whole 9 yards. Lamar, this is not the first time he has stood up for himself on social media, right? He has done it even with former players. I mean, I remember him and Bernard Pollard getting into it what seems like all those years ago now. But, I think that a lot of people believe that they can just kind of check athletes and be like, oh, they're not going to do anything back to me, right? I think that's the mindset of a lot of people. No, that's not the case. Like, yeah, sure, some athletes aren't about it and they're not going to respond, and that's fine. I'm not saying, what they should do or what they shouldn't do, but just to have an expectation that someone won't respond to you. And again, like, for a lot of these people who are purposely trying to get rises out of these guys, that's what they want. And so they're like, oh, haha, it's fake account. They don't know who my real account is. Like, whatever. But Lamar is sitting here and responding to these things. I know some people will say, oh, it makes him look bad. I don't think that way. I don't think it makes him look bad. I think he's passionate, and he doesn't want to put up with all this because, look, he puts up with plenty, right? He's responding to Stephen A. Smith for, false claims and all this other stuff. Like, he'll tell you, like, when something is not sitting right with him, he's not just going to sit back and let it slide. Like, if he sees it, I'm sure that he'll try to make something of it, but it's not Lamar making something of it to, like, make a scene or, ooh, let's add to this drama. It's like Lamar saying, hey, man, you think you can get away with saying something like that? It's not going to happen. So this is probably one of the more ferocious ways I've seen Lamar respond to haters. And again, I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm just saying, like, seeing it happen. And again, Lamar will go on those. It's honestly like a run, right? It's like he'll go on a run of like a day or two of him being on social media. And again, it could be him having fun with people. It could be him clapping back at haters. And, those Lamar clapbacks, they always hit different. But he's been on a run in these last couple of days. And, look, I'm not sure if more's going to happen here, but he's making it known that hey, you're going to mess with me? No, you're not. You're going to hear something back from me. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll move on to Jaire Alexander updates. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, he reported some interesting tidbits on how that deal came to be. We'll talk about Jaire in general as well coming up next on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. This is it. It all comes down to Game 7. It is tonight, and over on FanDuel, the Thunder are 7-point home favorites. I'm rocking with the Pacers. I am not wavering on my choice. I think the Pacers, the underdog story, they get the job done. Oklahoma City is a really tough place to play, but I think the Pacers, they have some more magic in them, and I think they're going to win the NBA Finals. And if I'm looking at the same game parlay here, I like Tyrese Halliburton over, Pascal Siakam over, Obi Toppin over. Those are my three Pacers I am going with over on FanDuel. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make everyone want more. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this little Sunday bonus edition episode. Appreciate everybody for being here today and hey, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. First listen each and every single day. If you have a friend or a family member who wants some daily Ravens coverage, wants some Ravens perspective, be sure to send them our way over here on Locked On Ravens. We do have the Monday through Friday regularly scheduled program show. Been doing this thing since 2019, August 2019. Lamar's first MVP season, and of course, I take credit for it because it's when I started the show. Lamar wins the MVP. Little correlation there, right? No, I'm just kidding, but really appreciate everybody for all the support. We got a lot of great things coming this season on Locked On Ravens. Really excited to unveil what those are. But let's unveil some updates from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN about Jaire Alexander. For those that maybe don't know the news, and I don't know why you wouldn't know this, but hey, guess what? The Ravens signed Jaire Alexander. You might have heard about it. Pretty big deal. It was a move that if you've been listening to me on Locked On Ravens for the past handful of years now, I have been begging for this move. I've been on record. It was my dream move for them for years. We did an instant reaction show when it happened. I was stumbling over myself looking for the words. I was ecstatic, as was a lot of the Ravens fan base for the move. But we were kind of wondering, and I was wondering in the moment too, like, hey, how did this all come together? Because we heard Lamar Jackson talking to the podium the day before, and he was like, all right, hey, Eric, go get him. Love all the corners, but go get him. That's my guy. That's my boy. And then less than 24 hours later, well, Jaire Alexander is a member of the Ravens. So Jeremy Fowler, he went on, he's an ESPN insider, and he talked about just how this all came together, which I thought honestly was very, very interesting because there were a lot of things here. So this coming on Sports Center, Jeremy Fowler said that Eric Acosta actually flirted with the idea of trading for Jaire Alexander back in March, which actually is very interesting considering the contract that he had. We know that Green Bay was trying to work some things out with him, maybe ask him to take a pay cut. In fact, it's pretty well documented that they were trying to work out something with Jaire there. But to me, the only way that I could really have seen this working, because, I had joked, and I had Peter Bukowski on the show yesterday. We did a segment with him and talked about Jaire, got the Locked On Packers perspective, because Peter does Locked On Packers, and I kind of sensed that there was some bad blood between Green Bay and Jaire, and Peter pretty much confirmed that, there was some both sides wanted different things. I'll say it like that. Both sides wanted different things. So if you haven't checked that out, first of all, Peter gives a ton of great perspective, but I only really thought this could work if the Ravens were able to sign him like this, right? He gets cut. The Packers and Green Bay can't agree on anything. It's just, the relationship is fractured to the point where both sides just move on. And then some combination of the Ravens being a great organization and, he wants to be in the building, and the fact that Lamar is here in Baltimore, which obviously those two played at Louisville. They're former college teammates, they're friends. Like some combination of that has Jaire take a far below market value deal. That was like the perfect storm, and that perfect storm ended up forming. And Baltimore now has Jaire. So look, we know that Eric DeCosta is always working the phones. He's always trying to make this team better. And I know that March for the Ravens is usually a lot slower than other teams because they're not ones to go out and spend $100 million on the first day of free agency. It's a pretty rare thing that they go and do that. Obviously, a couple of years ago with guys like Marcus Williams, Morgan Moses, and Zadarius Smith until that whole thing happened. But again, that was one of the rare instances where the Ravens did spend a lot of money on the first couple of days. Usually they're not doing that. And so the fact that DeCosta was flirting with that idea in March, right? They were already interested. Now, Jaire didn't actually make a commitment until he was on site. I know there was a lot of conversation about, hey, Jaire talked to Lamar. He was ready to sign when he got to the facility. Apparently, according to Jeremy Fowler, that was not the case. So he vibed with everybody, according to Jeremy. He was meshing with everyone. The Ravens heavily recruited him here. And those all were deciding factors in Jaire coming to Baltimore. It wasn't just like, hey, I talked to Lamar, I want to come to Baltimore, right? The Ravens had to do their recruiting, getting to figure out what he wanted, what they wanted, what the price point was, if it was going to work. So yes, Jaire wanted to play with Lamar, right? That's an undisputed fact. But according to Jeremy here, it seems like it was a lot more than that. And the Ravens, and I've said this, their reputation as a first-class organization, the opportunity for him to win a Super Bowl, all of that, I think those were all factors here. Now, a couple of the other teams, according to Jeremy Fowler, that he considered, the Dolphins and the Falcons were in that conversation. We heard Adam Schefter talking about the Panthers as a team that were in on the conversations, but it felt like, at least according to Jeremy here, the finalists for Jaire were the Ravens, the Falcons, and the Dolphins. And look, for Jaire, you probably had an opportunity to get a little more money there when the Dolphins are trying to move off Jalen Ramsey, and that feels more inevitable than ever at this point. I mean, it feels like Jalen Ramsey is going to be gone from that team in the next couple of weeks, it feels like, but maybe he could have replaced Jaire or replaced Jalen Ramsey. Jaire could have replaced Jalen Ramsey in Miami. The Falcons are an intriguing team there that, they're looking to take a year two leap with Michael Penix at the quarterback position. But I think the Ravens check all the boxes for Jaire, and I think Jaire checks all the boxes for the Ravens, which I think it benefits everybody. It truly does. And you look at Baltimore's secondary now, I love this graphic. You have Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Jaire Alexander, Malaki Starks, Chidobe Awuzie, TJ Tampa, Bo Brady, Sanusi Kane, Jalen Armour Davis. I might never stop showing this graphic ever on this show. It's like my fifth time pulling it up. And for those listening in audio form, to me, I love the fact that they have these 5 first-round picks, right? I want to explain this graphic a little bit here because, you have your 5 first-round picks in the secondary, but it's also the depth. And I've talked about that over and over again. It's also the depth. And it's also the ways that you have upgraded the secondary. You go from Brandon Stevens, Trey White there. Stevens got 3 years, $36 million from the Jets. Tre'Davious White, 1 year, $6.8 million up to with the Bills. Jaire Alexander gets 1 year, $6 million. I mean, he gets the best deal, or at least best bargain for the team. And he's the best player on this list by far. It's not even close, right? So, I know a lot of people when I ended up posting the actual graphic of that ended up, being like, the main takeaway wasn't how good Jaire's deal was with the Ravens. Actually, people were talking about, wait, Brandon Stevens got $12 million? Hold on a second. But it just goes to show that the Ravens, they are always working and they are always looking to make upgrades. Plus, they wait out the market for things like this. If they had done all this and signed other people and this, that, and they wouldn't have had the opportunity to sign Jaire because they either wouldn't have had the cap space or they wouldn't have had the roster space. But when an all-pro player like that hits the market and you're able to upgrade it like you have all offseason, again, Brandon Stevens and Jaire Alexander, Marcus Williams and Malaki Starks, Eddie Jackson and Chidobe Awuzie. It is just so much better across the board now. Alexander and Awuzie, they have their injury issues, right? That's the big thing here. Why were the Ravens able to get Jaire in the building like that? Well, because Green Bay didn't feel like paying him with all the off-field stuff and him doing whatever. And off-field, I mean, it wasn't meshing for them. He got suspended for contract detrimental to the team, I believe, one game when he tried to act like a captain or something against the Panthers. I don't know the whole story there, but he did get suspended for a game by Green Bay. It didn't work. But the other reason is because of injuries. He's played in 7 games in each of the last 2 seasons. That's a big concern point. So Baltimore takes this risk, but it's not really a risk in my opinion. Everybody says, oh, it's low risk, high reward. This to me is no risk, high reward. It is no risk, high reward for a player of Jaire's caliber. If it works, you're getting an all-pro player that hopefully can play in most, if not all, of your games. If it doesn't work, it's $4 million, up to $6 million if he gets those incentives. And truly, for that talent, I take a swing with that money on that talent 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000. Coming up in the final part of the show, are the Ravens done? We'll talk about that as well as getting into some minicamp conversation as well, because the Jaire news just swept everything minicamp under the rug. So stay tuned, plenty to come here on the show. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher rounding out this bonus episode of the show today. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow and all throughout next week with our regularly scheduled programming. So if you want to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form, subscribe over there as well. Appreciate you for doing so. Are the Ravens done? It's an interesting conversation, right? Because the Ravens will have to free up some more cap space. And I asked a question on the YouTube page. It was a poll about, hey, are the Ravens done adding to their roster? You know, with Jaire, it's a big move. They used up, Brian McFarland said the Ravens essentially had $5 million in workable cap space. The Ravens use up, you know, most of that to not use up anymore, or are they going to free up more space? And 72% of people said the Ravens are not done. We got 1.2K votes on this, so 1,200 votes. Appreciate everybody who weighed in on these. And I put these polls up on the YouTube page almost every day. I try to do it every day, but it's almost every day. And we had 72% of people say no, they are not done adding. 28% of people said yes. I also put up a poll recording this about an hour ago, and I said, which final piece would you like to see the Ravens add after their Jaire Alexander signing, you know, if they're not done? And right now, you know, we only have 41 votes on it. It's later at night right now, so I'm not expecting a ton of turnout, you know, when I'm recording it, but I'm sure we're going to get a lot more as the day goes on here. Right now, Jadeveon Clowney is in the lead at 49%. Justin Simmons comes in number 2 at 29%. Then you have other at 17% and no one at 5%. And some of the comments here, we have one that says, I say better offensive lineman. All we have on offensive line is Linderbaum and Ronnie, and the rest are terrible. Hey, I'd say Roger Rosengarten's pretty good too there. But, you know, regardless, I think that the Ravens do have an opportunity to maybe add one more piece. And I had Sam Njoku on the show on Friday, and we talked about it. Hey, Sam, I asked him, Sam, are the Ravens done? Do you think the Ravens still have something up their sleeve? And he sounded pretty convinced in his response. So I want to play that clip, and then we'll react to what Sam said on the other side. Are the Ravens not done, though, Sam? Do you feel like the Ravens still have more in the tank? Is there a Justin Simmons, Jadeveon Clowney coming down the pipeline for this team, or was Jaire the last big move you expect for them this offseason?
They're not done. They're not done. I know the Ravens. Trust me when I say they're not finished. I think they're really focusing in on the Lamar Jackson contract. If I had to ponder a guess, and whichever way that goes, then they decide to move in. It won't be an extravagant blockbuster move by any stretch of the imagination, but a guy like Justin Simmons is just a depth veteran piece. We talked about this a few weeks ago about just having another depth piece of that safety group. But if they liked what they saw in minicamp from Sunisa Kane and others, then maybe they decide to stick it out. But I wouldn't be surprised if they get another depth piece at guard. I know there's talks of Emory Jones not being quite ready for training camp, getting a depth piece at safety. I don't think they're done. I think that Eric DeCosta is going all in, chips on the middle of the table, and they're going to see what they can get from this team. But, yeah, there's definitely more moves coming, I'm sure.
If you haven't checked out that episode with Sam, we have a lot of great conversation in there, and I tend to agree where I do think they have the room for one big move, but I think that it does hinge on Lamar Jackson or another extension getting done. You know, them freeing up some money, as Sam points out there, you know, for Lamar, from his perspective, that's the one that you really could free up some money with. And then maybe you do bring in that final piece like a Simmons, a guard depth piece. Maybe it is Clowney or someone else. But the Ravens, to me, as I said, they are always looking to improve, right? Their roster up and down right now is pretty incredible. But at the end of the day, they have a lot of, you know, things that they could work with where, oh, hey, maybe it is an edge. Maybe it is a guard, safety, you know, that they have opportunities to make that roster even better, which feels so weird to say because it already is so good. But man, I'll tell you, if the Ravens do make another move and it is like of the Simmons or Clowney variety, people are already screaming super team with this Ravens team, and that would push it to a whole nother level. So am I expecting anything? Like, am I saying it's a done deal, it's 100% going to happen? I'm not saying that, but I do think that there is a possibility that something does happen, because I think that there are still fits available. And every time there's someone out there that fits, I'm sure the Ravens are doing their due diligence. They've proven that over and over again. But I want to talk about some minicamp as well, because, again, the Jaire Alexander news happened right before day 2 of minicamp kicked off for them. The Ravens are now off for about a month before training camp begins. And Jaire Alexander, former Baltimore Ravens receiver, Super Bowl champion, we have him on every single week like we do Sam and Njoku. And Q was at minicamp the 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday. And so I asked him some of his takeaways. We talked about Lamar Jackson. I want to play that clip because, Q said he looked sharp during those OTA practices, but had an uneven day, according to most people who were at minicamp on Wednesday. And so Q had some thoughts on Lamar's performance. What were your takeaways from watching Lamar these past couple of days?
So just from a fitness aspect of things, I think Lamar looked great. I think he looked fast. I think he's, he's ready to go. I think in the 3 days technically of this offseason that I saw, obviously the 1 day comes in when it is, OTA. He just was slinging it. Looked great. These 2 days, it kind of looked like, I'm here. I'm ready, but I'm also ready to go. So there were some throws, that I think he would have probably said he would love to have had back. But, he was engaged. He was there. It's like, all right, bet. Some of his passes were batted down. Again, the defense swarming, doing their thing. I think that they're, excited to kind of pick up their pace and see what they can do.
So Q's not saying that Lamar just like, oh, there's no effort. That's not the message Q put out there. But look, hey, Lamar's had uneven days of practice, right? We've heard him have uneven days of practice every single offseason. It's fine. I'm not worried about it. And I appreciate Q, giving his insight on Lamar there, because, these guys they're working hard. They have worked hard. They're continuing to work hard. But, as Q mentioned, fitness-wise, Lamar looks great. He's looked sharp at other practices. Like, guys have off days sometimes. I mean, and that Ravens secondary, by the way, is pretty good, even though Jaire did not actually practice on Wednesday. He was just on the sideline and in shorts and a T-shirt. But, the Ravens secondary, that Ravens defense has dudes on it. And again, I love the phrase, the saying, iron sharpens iron, because truly that is what the Ravens do each and every day in practice. And I think it does have an impact on how they perform against their opponents. Now, Q also had some pretty glowing things to say about one key member of the offense that some people might not be so high on. So we'll talk about what Q had to say and who it is, and then we'll talk about that clip. Who are some guys that really stood out to you outside of the guys I've already talked about?
Here's one where I think, people might want to clown him, but he was defended by Mark Andrews. I don't know about last year. Clearly he had some things going on. Clearly he got into the car accident and it hampered his progression. That dude looked fast. That dude looks in shape. Like fast. 2 times, one in the first minicamp practice, one in the second minicamp practice, where he caught a ball and took it about 60. Separating and look good. So I know, you're asking me who looked what, but I gotta mention him. And I can see why Lamar, let's not forget, that's my guy. He looked good.
I'm really happy to hear that Mark looks good. And again, he's a guy that's a top 5 tight end to me. I understand that in the playoffs, he hasn't been who the Ravens have needed him to be. I understand the last moment we saw from Mark, and what is just burned into our minds is him dropping that 2-point conversion and the fumble late in that Buffalo game. It's all true. It's all there. I'm not denying that. And he does need to improve upon all of that. But he started off slow last year. Q mentioned the car accident, and he was getting phased out by defenses. Like, the game plan was take away Mark Andrews and let somebody else beat you. That's why Isaiah Likely in week 1 went off, right? Because the Chiefs were like, hey, we know Mark is Mark. Let's see if Isaiah Likely can do it to us. And by the way, he did. And he almost even did it more because of the toe on the line. But I digress. Mark is still a really good player. He's still a really good player. One of the best tight ends in this league. I think this is probably his last year in Baltimore because I think the Ravens should pick Isaiah Likely. I think he has, he oozes potential. Isaiah oozes potential. But it's unrealistic they can pay 2 tight ends top dollar like they would have to in that situation. But for me, Mark is a player that can have a major impact. And I don't know how the snaps are going to be split. I don't know if it's going to be Mark tight end 1, Isaiah tight end 1, this, that, and the other. We'll have other conversations about that as the months go on before he gets to the regular season. But he is an asset to this team, even if it is just him being a decoy, even if it is him being phased out of the game plan and teams having to force help his way, because that frees up other guys. And with the additions they have made, like a DeAndre Hopkins, improvements from guys like Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, all those guys taking steps forward, Derrick Henry, like everybody, that helps Lamar. That helps everybody. That helps the team. And Mark is a guy that is still really good despite what happened in that Buffalo game. So really glad to hear Q talk about Mark there. And there are other guys who stood out as well. We'll continue to talk about that. I have lined up someone who was at minicamp as well, another person. So we'll be diving into that with them. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning in to the show. Really nice couple of bonus episodes over the weekend. And of course, we'll be back here tomorrow talking more Ravens football. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.